Hello, this is the Douglas County, Colorado chapter of FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. This November, voters will elect 3 candidates to the Douglas County School District Board of Education. We're interviewing candidates to learn more about them, their ideas, and where they stand on issues related to intolerance, racism, and our common humanity. There are 7 candidates running. We reached out to and followed up with all 7 candidates, but unfortunately, despite our persistence, we only heard back from 3 of them. We're very grateful to the 3 who sat down and spoke with us, and we're hopeful that next election, every candidate will jump at the opportunity to speak with FAIR. I'm your host, Amit Gupta. I'm a volunteer with FAIR and a resident of Highlands Ranch. I hope you find these interviews insightful. If you like what you see and would like to learn more about FAIR, please visit fairforall.org. In the following interview, I spoke with Jason Page. Jason and his wife Holly have lived in Highlands Ranch since 2015. They have a daughter in 6th grade attending school in Douglas County. Jason currently serves on the Board of Education as the director for District C. He served in this position since June of 2023, and this November, he's running in the election to retain this position. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Good afternoon, Jason. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Amit. Pleasure to be here.
Great. I'm glad we could do this and have this conversation. So this is an opportunity for me to ask questions and for you to kind of share with me and the voters, what you're about and what motivates you and what your priorities are. So I'm just going to get into it. Let me start with my first question. Why? Why are you running? What's your motivation?
I think there are a lot of people out there that ask that same question, and due to the answer most of them would be, I would never want to do this job, right? So first of all, it's not a job, right? This is a completely volunteer role. So for those that don't know, being on the school board of Douglas County pays exactly $0. So it is a huge volunteer effort, between monthly, sometimes meetings twice a month, and really helping guide one of the largest school districts in the country. For me, first and foremost, I do have skin in the game. I have a daughter who's got at least, hopefully just 7 more years left of school here in the district. And having been on the school board at her district charter school previously, actually throughout the majority of COVID, that's where I kind of dipped my toes into the whole world of what it looks like to, not only run a school, but now run a school district. My first impetus to run for the school board at my daughter's school was that no one was running. And that really saddened me that parents weren't willing to step up to help guide their child's education. So it took me 3 tries, but I was literally either the other person or one of 2 other people to run at a school with 900 students, so roughly 1,800 guardians or parents. The fact that we only had 2 or 3 people willing to step up was really kind of sad. So for me, it was, if I'm going to say talk the talk, I should walk the walk when it comes to if there are things that I see that could be done better, or even just knowing how things are run and getting involved in the budget and how we do policy and what does it take to run a school. And so I did that role for 2 years, like I said, during the entirety of COVID from 2019 to 2021, and also concurrently wanting to know how the district was run. I also I was invited to join the Long Range Planning Committee at the Douglas County School District level, learning more about how the district plans for growth and for decline, and how do we figure out the boundaries of neighborhoods, which schools do they go to, where are we going to build new schools, and those kind of things. And so it really opened my eyes to just the enormity of what this school district is. And honestly, it was through conversations that my wife had with some friends at a moms in prayer meeting for my daughter's school um, in the springtime, where they were just really concerned that we just don't have good. Once again, we don't have good people running for these roles at the school district level. Um, and so my wife said, "Well, my husband has been on the school board before, and he's on the long range planning committee, and maybe, and he's thought about possibly um, pursuing some other opportunities like that." And so that turned into someone reading my bio, and then more and more people stating, "Hey, you'd be a great fit." And then lo and behold, in April, the seat in District C came open when the then current director resigned abruptly. And so then there became a process to get for an appointment to happen in my district. Um, and so I figured, what better way to at least dip my toes in it to see how this goes. And I was fortunate enough to go through the interview process and be picked to be appointed to that seat. And so I've been um, on the board since June, and now that I'm in it and see the complexities, but see um, that I think there's work to be done, and that I think I can do the work that I'm running to hold the seat in November.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you kind of coming from a unique position that, this is in some sense your first time running for this as an elected position, but you've actually been doing it for a little bit. You've seen a little bit on the inside, and I'm guessing slow down a bit in the summer, but you've seen, you just mentioned there's work to be done. So maybe you can tell me, what do you think are the top 3 priorities, that you want to tackle in taking on this role? What are the top 3 priorities for you in the district?
Absolutely. I'm running as a slate. Got 2 excellent candidates, Andy Jones and Maria Sumnick, running in the other districts as well. And are really, and these, I have total buy-in on this, and our priorities is, to really further the work that the Kids First candidates came in with, 2 years ago. Top being just continued excellence in academics, and the focus on preparing our students for whatever pathway that they have for future as adults. That's still excuse me, number 1 priority. Second is student safety and success, to ensure that our students are in safe and caring schools. We just had a great presentation at the last school board meeting from several individual school leaders, principals, just about how they generate really, really positive culture in our schools in Douglas County, which was just amazing. And then third, really to solidify kind of what I call like the iron triangle between the parents, the teachers, and the community, that we're a team, with that primary role of teaching really being the parent, but then driving those partnerships between then the teachers, the administration, and the overall community. How do we raise our kids the best, with that primary driver being the parent?
Okay, interesting. That the last point about parents and teachers and children, I want to come back to that in a minute, but want to ask you first about your number 1 priority. You said academic excellence. Tell me a little bit more, like, why is that number 1? I mean, in some sense, it makes sense. Obviously, it's a number 1 priority, but like, is it a problem? Is there something that needs to be fixed? Is academic excellence already there? Is there something to be done, or is it already in good shape? Why is it such a high priority?
Well, number 1, that's the goal of our school district, right? Is to generate future adults who are critical thinkers, who can engage in their communities and society, whether that's going to college or joining the military, having a job right out of the gate, with our career and technical programs. So just the fact that that's what the school is there for, is to prepare our students to engage with the world. So that should always be the priority. And to say that we're lacking um, it's not a true statement. We're still one of the best school districts. In fact, in our most recent test scores coming back in several different areas, especially, so say in CMAS scores, we were the number 7 school districts in the state and the number 1 in the whole entire metro district, blowing everyone out of the water. So the fact that, we'll probably allude to this more, the fact that we're doing this, under the guise of being one of the lowest paid school district is, in my estimation, is a miracle that we're able to produce, and the teachers that we have are so awesome, that we're still a shining light when it comes to kids' achievement, and we want to keep those standards high because a rising tide floats all boats, and so the fact of the matter is that keeping those standards high and keeping those academics at a high level generates a culture of that excellence, and we want all kids to experience that.
So do you see any risks or issues about those standards dropping?
Unfortunately, yes. The dedication of these teachers is phenomenal, but when we're faced with the economic reality of being so far behind, even districts that are only another 5 to 15-minute commute away, we're not talking about teachers having to drive an hour. We're talking teachers can drive 10 minutes and immediately make $20,000 a year on the first day of school. One of my directors, we all split up and we actually go just try to visit almost every school in the district to just to observe first days and kids' excitement, the staff's excitement. And there was a teacher who literally resigned the first day of school because it's like, I got another offer at a district right next door, and it's more than we just need the money to help pay for rent or their mortgage or those things. And it's just sad that on a basic level, we have to compete raw on on salary, because we win almost in every corner on culture. But as we all know, culture doesn't pay the bills. And so we want to be able to match the culture, to paying our teachers and staff well enough that not only they have the commitment of the culture, but it shows that the community is backing them because we see the academic excellence and we want to maintain that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think personally, that's a really interesting topic to me. You mentioned, teachers' pay, and maybe another day we can chat about that.
Sure.
Today I'm going to stick to FAIR and the stuff that FAIR talks about. So
sure.
I'm really passionate about fiscal responsibility and that kind of thing. Maybe another day.
Yeah, I am as well, and it is a more complicated topic than I think people realize as well. So it's worth having conversations about.
Indeed, yeah. All right, great. So we kind of got a deep dive, like concretely, what are your top 3 priorities for the school district? What are you going to do? I want to zoom out now, big picture, more about you. What are the principles and values that guide your decision making generally?
Sure. For me, I am a Christian, and so that is where I base my worldview on, and so that's my moral compass, and what guides my principles and where my principles are found, and that's and to say that on a video is a loaded term, because anyone can put any number of labels on what a Christian is.
Yeah.
But
so how
yes, right.
There's many different denominations, and
sure.
There's fundamentalists, there's progressives, all different kinds of Christians. So
right.
a little bit, like, how does your faith more specifically guide your decision making?
Yeah, I think in a general sense, when it comes to looking at how we teach our kids, my goal is not to proselytize inside of the schools, but the basic principles of human value, that all of us individually are valued and are valuable, and to treat each other with a mutual respect, regardless of whether or not we like everything that someone else does. I mean, obviously we can get into discussions around if someone's doing harm to you, that's another discussion. But having, the common bond of human decency, and that everyone is valued is really a key for myself. And what that means is that you can, even use the term love somebody but you don't necessarily have to condone their behavior. I think there's a line that's been drawn culturally and ideologically where just because you disagree with somebody, that automatically puts you in a category of hating somebody, and that's not a good place to be as a society. We can have disagreements, we can have these types of discussions, but we don't have to hate one another if we fall on a one side or the other of an issue. So for me, that's the key guiding principle for me and being on the school board is ensuring that we create a culture of respect, and integrity, and doing the right thing. And again, that means you don't have to agree with somebody, but that is not cause for you to quote unquote hate somebody, because we all have our issues, we're all going through things, and just to an understanding of, hey, you know what, life is can be tough, and the world is a tough place, but the fact that I will give you the shirt off my back regardless of who you are, if you're in need, those are the kind of principles that I try to guide myself on.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So my next question, I'm going to come back to your priority number 3. And from the perspective of FAIR, FAIR believes all perspectives should be heard. So you talked about teachers, parents, and students. Is there one of those voices, or maybe all, or 2 of those voices? Like, are there voices in that triangle, as you put it, that you think are underrepresented, not heard enough today? Yeah, I'm going to start with that, and then there's a follow-up. Like, is there any group that's not getting heard enough today, you think?
I think there's definitely been an awakening of the parent voice in the past several years, that has been very underheard in the recent past, and I think that's coming to a fore, and I think that we have an engaged parent group now in the district level, which is fantastic, but we can always use more. I think it's when you see the people that are usually making comments in public comments, it's usually the same 15 or 20 people, and the people that are on the different district committees are a lot of the same folks, which I super appreciate their dedication to the district. But again, in my first foray into running for a school board at one of our charter schools, there should be more than 2 or 3 people running running for these roles, and we should have a line out the door of parents willing to want to to volunteer some time. And I get time is precious, but I think that's a real key is for parents to really be involved in it and really understand what's going on, what they're being taught. Not to say that everything they're being taught is bad. In fact, I think the vast majority of it is excellent. But to really know what your kid's learning, so that you can have the parents can have those conversations with their kids about tough issues, and and they understand what their family values and those kind of things, instead of it just being impressed on on the teachers and maybe on the counselors. Let it be a revival of true family conversations, and being involved, not because you're a helicopter parent, but be involved because you care about your kid and you want to know what they're learning and have those conversations, so that we're all making informed decisions. Nothing, the wool is over no one's eyes in terms of what curriculum we're teaching here, and what some things that maybe as a parent, as a family, maybe would not necessarily want to expose their kid to, some other parents would. So having the choice to opt in or opt out of those things, I think, is really important from the parent perspective.
Okay, so what would you say to somebody who says, all this teachers, parents right stuff, the parents voice stuff, that's just going to result in, parents kind of not just being helicopter parents, but breathing down the teachers' necks, not letting the professionals do their jobs, not to mention, maybe it's just some activist parent and they're trying to push an agenda and making it sound under the guise of parents' rights, they're trying to push their own ideology into the school district. What would you say to somebody who says something like that?
Well, there's always a balance when you live in a country that the founding principles are based on free speech and the ability to have a marketplace of ideas. And so I think that the answer is not to necessarily squash those voices, but to let them be heard and let them be, judged in the marketplace of ideas. And, that's, I think, where the community piece comes in, as, when the community as a whole says, um, or at least a majority of the community, may side this side or the other. And then the school board has to weigh, how we balance, implementing policy that is not, you know, certainly not squashing free speech, but also not forcing, compelled speech. So it's a fine line, but again, it's a matter of mutual respect, not pushing any one particular ideology, but sticking to facts and skills and the ability for students to go through adversity. We have great mental health staff, at the various levels as well, to be able to talk through those things. But at the same time, the parents need to know what's going on with their child, because there are times where they may, and I get it. My daughter is the same way, of being afraid sometimes to tell us what happened, or she made a mistake, or because she's afraid of consequences. Then sometimes consequences have to happen, but at the same time, knowing that we love her, we want the best for her, and that we want to be able to talk. And there's always specific instances, these anomalies where maybe there's a home situation that's not healthy, right? And so there are avenues of which teacher, like the whole safe to tell kind of thing, and making sure that we're following all those guidelines, from a law enforcement perspective as well. But in terms of making sure that everyone's voice is heard specifically, but that ultimately it does really reside with the parents as to how their kids' education is kind of laid out. But teachers are experts in their fields, but we want them to, I think we're trying to take away some of those things that really teachers shouldn't be involved in, so that they can really double down on the things they are expert in and teach that really well, right?
Some of those things you would say are like not a teacher's job.
Getting into maybe counseling to a level that may be beyond the teacher student relationship, or when we get past talking about maybe having a lively debate on pros and cons. We're talking about Civil War issues around states' rights and slavery, like talking about why were they arguing, why were there pros, why were there cons, and those kind of things. But maybe pushing that into the 21st century, and other ideologies that are like have been kind of twisted to maybe manipulate what actually happened in history, versus what we're trying to impose as what we know now in 2023, that people didn't know then in 1861, or what was the predominant thought. And so just being careful of putting a lens on some topics where history happened in history, and to judge those people based on what we know now, is kind of a tough thing to do.
Is there stuff in history that you would not teach, I guess?
Oh no, absolutely not. We want to go into the guise of slavery. Slavery is terrible. Slavery was an awful thing.
There
Slavery,
you would not introduce that, or introduce that? Think about that.
I don't think that's like people like a first grader knowing that in history there was people that were like were ruled under really bad people, and were treated terribly, right, under the guise of quote unquote slavery. But there's also we still have kings and queens in certain countries to this day, right? And so is that an antiquated thing? I mean, those are cultural things as well. But the idea of slavery, absolutely, it's wrong. But there are other maybe ideologies when you go down a path of more of a human sexuality nature, where I think that needs to be a little more nuanced. Whereas slavery, bad. We've moved to the point where slavery still exists today in many countries, and that's a terrible blight on the world still, and we still need to fight against that. But the fact that for the majority of us, we live in a place where, especially in the United States, where all men are created equal, and the founding fathers, who had to deal with slavery, and some of them were even slave owners, but still created foundational documents that were like, hopefully, as we get better and we can eliminate some of these things, we want to put these deeply held truths into our foundational documents that even if we can't fully implement it, that maybe as we grow, as a country, we can, and I think we have.
Gotcha. Okay, so and let me just kind of circle back. So you want to elevate the parents' voices. What would you do, or what concretely needs to change to make that happen? You as director, how would you do that?
Well, I think some of the things have already been done. So we revised our policy KB to have students not be compelled to share any personal information or make statements that as themselves and their family, they might have beliefs that are maybe against what someone else is having them try to say, and that parents and guardians can have access to those any sort of educational materials. There's nothing hidden. And if having the ability to opt out of certain things, and having the parent being able to raise their kid as they see fit. I think we've put in those that wording inside of our policies to ensure that how parents raise their kids is number one. And what I think that releases teachers having to deal with some of those issues to where that just falls back on the parents, and we're gonna push forward with academic excellence and teaching kids just to treat each other with respect, and and learn skills, learn how to just be good humans, right?
Mhm. Great. Okay, so in the spirit of being good humans, I want to read to you part of FAIR's Pro-Human Pledge. We got something called the Pro-Human Pledge. It's got 3 parts. The first part is about fairness, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, I seek to treat everyone equally without any regards to skin color or other immutable characteristics. I believe in applying the same rules to everyone and reject disparagement of individuals based on the circumstances of their birth. Would you agree with that statement?
Right, absolutely. I have no qualms with that.
Do you see any issues in DCSD that kind of maybe violate that principle of fairness?
I mean, I don't know if it violates, but I think we have to be careful when we continue to push, a narrative that you need to be you need to be known, for your immutable characteristics, and that's how you're going to be judged versus on your personal character, right? And these groups are getting smaller and smaller and smaller into these micro groups to the point where now, how is it that you're not quote unquote offending someone because they're in some tiny group that there's a possibility of these terms that have been created like microaggressions and all these things that everyone's afraid to even talk to each other. So I think the idea of that we treat people based on how they treat us, not to say that and again, as a Christian, I'm called to love my enemies. I'm called to, if someone hits me, I'm gonna love on them. So it's the idea that and I think it's radical, but yet it's very simplistic of you treat others as you want to treat you, and that's something biblical, but I think most of the world is trying to adopt something like that. So yeah, not base your judgment on someone's immutable characteristics, but base them on mutual respect of being a human, and how you would want to be treated, for sure.
What would you say to the idea that it's not about judging somebody or treating somebody differently based on their sort of group identity, but acknowledging the fact that even if you don't want to do that, other people do. There are people out there who just look at somebody and say they're part of that group and immediately judge them, and that's a reality that person needs to live with. And some of this stuff is about making sure everybody's aware that that's how some people go through life, and we don't all have the same different people are part of different groups, and that means they go through life with different experiences than other people in other groups.
Yeah, and that is true, and that is that's where we have to judge those people individually, as you're not being a good human, and we, you know, we honor those who honor others, and we, that's the whole idea, that the whole marketplace of ideas is that that voice just gets softer and softer and softer, because really we just ignore those people, and we don't let their voice have an impact. 'Cause it's once you give that, that voice of someone who's like, well, I am going to judge you based on your skin color, I am going to judge you based on your gender. If we give that voice a megaphone, yeah, it's gonna resound. But if we just turn and walk in the other direction, it gets diffused. And so the idea of being unoffendable, I think is a huge thing that we as a culture can really adopt, is the fact that people's opinions are people's opinions. I'm definitely more of someone I want to see your actions, because we can't judge a person's heart. There's no way we can really truly know. But are they acting like, are they treating someone with respect? Then I respect that person. And who knows, they might despise a certain people group, but in their actions, they're still able to treat that person with respect. That's a big deal. And so I have much more respect for the person that maybe I know doesn't like X group, but yet, they still respect them, versus someone who say, oh, they do respect them, but yet they treat people mean just because that's of their nature too. So I think it's really down to a heart issue. And yeah, there's just always going to be people that are just going to be mean and just have their opinions. But if we don't give them the ability to, to kind of get underneath your skin, that voice will eventually go away.
Gotcha. So, we kind of touched on different groups, how are different groups treated, how are different groups seen, and that really dovetails a lot with the equity policy, which has been a big topic for a couple of years. Give me your take on the equity policy. It was recently changed significantly in May. What do you think of those changes? And like, to you, what would be ideal? What's like an ideal equity policy, should one even exist?
Well, it depends. It's, what the definition of equity is. If you're going to say, from a pure sense of, equity being equality of outcome, first of all, there's no way that we can guarantee that these students are going to have the same outcome when they finish, going through our school district, because it's so much based on their own effort, their own circumstances, their own interactions with their peers and with their teachers, just if they have goals in mind and all those things. So to say that what is equity, and to say that, if some person does really well and some person doesn't do well, how do we squash the opportunity for those that excel to excel, just so that people that don't excel, and whether or not it's of their own accord, to make them quote unquote feel better. I think the idea being is that in the school district, we should really strive for an equity of opportunity. And I think that's where the equity policy has done a really good job, is the fact that we're not going to lower standards or expectations. Speaking of people groups, or even identified subgroups, that we keep the same standards, because these kids are going to have to go out into the same world. And so to somehow have different standards, for, again, just because of people's immutable characteristics, that's not doing them a service at all, let alone the world. And the idea that we have equity of access and opportunity. So and we do that. So for students with special needs, it costs the district 2, 3, 4, 5 times more to educate that student than a typical student that's just in a regular college prep curriculum. But we're trying to, at the end, have that student be able to have some independent living skills and have the opportunity to live a full and meaningful life for them when they come out of our programs, the same way that someone that would go to college or go join the military or join a trade would. And so in terms of equity of opportunity, I think that's where the key is. And I think we do a really good job, especially in our career and technical, for those students who are just, hey, college isn't for me. I'm super skilled at, welding, or I'm learning, electronics, or like cybersecurity. A lot of, I mean, even for me that has multiple degrees, I look back and look at what the opportunities kids have now. You don't need a college degree to be super successful. In fact, a lot of the billionaires out there, including Bill Gates, like doesn't have a college degree. So the idea of really equity of opportunity, I think, is really what the focus should be on, and not necessarily based on, again, things like immutable characteristics.
Gotcha. All right. So nonetheless, many people disagree. So I'm gonna read the second part of the Affairs Pro-Human Pledge. This one is about understanding. It says, I am open-minded. I seek to understand opinions or behavior that I do not necessarily agree with. I pursue objective truth through honest inquiry. I'm tolerant and consider points of view that are in conflict with my convictions. So could you tell me, if you're familiar with the word steel man, it's like the opposite of a straw man. Like, what's the strongest way you could frame the opposite opinion of what you have? I kind of want to understand, how do you understand kind of the opposite point of view when it comes to this things like this equity policy?
I mean, I would say that the opposite would be that.
What's like the strongest possible framing of because I guess my follow-up question to that is, you're going to be working with other directors who have that strongly held opposite point of view.
Sure.
The two other directors, Susan Meek is up for potential re-election. And then, if she gets reelected, and who knows who else is going to be elected.
Sure.
I have people on that board who strongly disagree with you. So, you'll need to, in the interest of working together and open conversation, you'll need to honestly understand where they're coming from and come to common ground. So what's your best sort of steelman charitable interpretation, however you want to put it, of that opposite point of view?
I mean, so I feel that the opposite point of view, which I think is a very sad and almost unable to overcome view, is that there are certain groups, groups of humans that are a quote unquote ruling or an oppressive class, and some that are in the oppressed, and some that are oppressed, and somehow that can never change. And so why bother, shooting for hard work and perseverance when the quote unquote the man will push you down? And therefore, since it is such an inequitable world, we need to take from those who are in this quote unquote privileged and or oppressive, oppressor state, and give some of those quote unquote resources and or things that they quote unquote have, to the oppressed class, to then make things more equitable. But I think that does a huge disservice, especially to our kids, to state that no matter how hard you work, you'll never be X or Y or Z. Number one, we have to understand that there's all sorts of circumstances out there for kids, but there's been all sorts of circumstances for all of humanity since the beginning of time, and there are certain characteristics of people that overcome that, and there are certain characteristics of people that don't overcome that. And I think to push a narrative that states that just because of your circumstances, or somehow how you were born, you can't do things that other people do. Now, granted, I'm not a thin individual. I am not going to run as fast as probably most people. And so there are certain things that I'm limited to, but in terms of my capability of like making an impact in my community and you know, and having a good job and learning things and you know, or doing multitudes of things should not be squelched by the fact that someone is telling you you can't. You know, yes, we all have limitations, but just a level set that you tell a student that, hey, because you're this or because you're that, you'll never amount to anything, I think does a huge disservice. So I think, you know, on the flip side of that is we want to push for academic excellence, set the bar high. And you know what? I tell my daughter, if you work as hard as you can on a certain subject, you know, and you get a B, I'm good with that. But if I know you have the capability of getting an A and you kind of, you know, didn't, you know, you kind of did you wrote this essay at the last minute and you still got a B. Yeah, I'm not going to be satisfied because I know that you can do, you know, you can do better and you just chose not to. So it's a matter of making sure that, you know, yeah, the kid, we're at best effort and this is where you land. Fantastic. But don't squish other people's ability to say, get to here when, you know, maybe your top level is here. You know, there's always going to be a disparity in the world of, you know, haves and have nots and all those things. But again, we treat each other with respect, regardless of whether we land. And I think that's where we should go versus trying to pigeonhole people into boxes that automatically disqualify them from reaching certain levels.
Gotcha. All right. Last question for you. Getting to the November race. Tell me about your opponents and why you're better than them. What's your pitch?
Oh, what a loaded question. So fair being, you know, being an equality of the human race kind of thing. I literally am no better than Brad Geiger or Dave DiCarlo. We are all human beings. We all have flaws. We all believe, you know, in different things. I would hope that in me stating that I'm human, I make mistakes, but my goal is ultimately for what is best for our kids and that we want the best for our kids and that I am willing to listen to all sides. But yet I'm not going to bend to my core principles and beliefs. But at the same time, I'm also not going to not listen to somebody just because they may be, you know, on a different position on a certain topic, because that's how we grow and that's how we gain mutual respect, so that the core things that we can come to agreement on, we can, and we can do it joyfully and not with bitterness that, oh, I have to side with this person, even though like I do want to side with them, but I just have vitriol for this person. It's like, let's do what's best for the kids, you know, work together, the things that need to be, you know, with parents and with families, keep with parents and keep with families, and let's do what we need to do in the district to, you know, teach kids well, teach them respect of one another, you know, belonging to something bigger than themselves. Andy Abner, who's the principal of Rock Canyon, meets every kid every day and says, great day to be a JAG, you know, so every kid, doesn't matter what they look like, where they came from, how much money they do or don't have or whatever, they all come in and they're all JAGs, you know, and that's something that we want, you know, they're all, you know, yes, you're your parent's son or daughter, but when you go to that school, you have a sense of belonging and a culture that respects everybody individually and that we're all striving for the best. And so if that means that you vote for me over the other guys, great. If you want to vote for them because you feel that they align more with you, I would just encourage you in any regard for everyone out there, please just vote. You know, vote who you deem would be the best for the district, but please don't sit on the sidelines. At least make your voice be heard.
Okay. All right. Thank you. With that, that's a wrap. I really appreciate you sitting down and taking the time to answer all these questions. I learned a lot and I hope it's beneficial for our audience. I hope you had fun as well.
Thanks, Amit. It was great to talk. And anyone has any other questions about us or my running mates, Andy and Maria, we have bestdcsd.com. They can read about our platform. And if they have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them from that site.
Sounds great. Thank you, Jason. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.